Welcome to this week's Fix It Friday. So, how many mistakes did you manage to find in these 6 different formulae for ionic compounds? Well, let's have a look at the first one. And the first one definitely has a mistake in it. So, magnesium hydroxide, the person has obviously worked out that magnesium is in group 2, has a 2+ charge, and that the hydroxide ion has a charge of 1-. So we do need 2 hydroxide ions, but to combine them together, we need to use a bracket around the whole hydroxide ion. Otherwise, it looks like we've only got 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogens in the compound. What about the second one? Sodium bromide? This one is also wrong. So there's nothing wrong with the way that they've thought about the charges. Na has a charge of +1 and the bromide ion has a charge of -1, but what they have done is skipped looking at the periodic table, and this happens way more often than you think because the symbol for bromine is Br. Make sure that that isn't you, because it really sucks to have put a thought into a formula only to lose the mark because you didn't take a few seconds just checking what you thought you knew on the periodic table. The next one, sodium sulfide, is our first one that's actually right. And that's because sodium is in group 1, so it has a 1+ charge, and the sulfide ion has a 2-. So when we combine them, we need 2 of our sodiums for 1 sulfur. Now let's have a look at the next one. So transition metals do not have a fixed charge or oxidation state, and so therefore we often use these Roman numerals in the compound to tell us about the charge on the transition metal, and that's super important because this next one is wrong. The 1 does not tell us how many of the negative ion or how many of any of each type of ion there are. The 1 tells us the charge on the transition metal, so it tells us about the charge of the thing that goes before it. So it's telling us that copper has a 1+ charge, and we need that information because copper can form ions with +1 or +2. Oxygen is in group 6, so the oxide ion, like the sulfide ion, has a 2- charge. That means that very much like the formula above, Na2S, we need to have 2 copper ions for every 1 oxide ion, giving us a formula of Cu2O. So do not assume that Roman numerals refer to the number of the ions. Iron 3 oxide is therefore correct, and that's because the 3 tells us iron has a 3+ charge. Oxide still has a 2-. To get an overall charge of 0 for a compound, I'm therefore going to need 2 lots of my 3+ and 3 lots of my 2-. And the last one says calcium sulfate. You really need to know your sulfates from your sulfides. So ide refers to a negative ion or a negatively kind of polarized part of a compound that is just made up of one single atom, such as chloride, bromide, oxide, nitride, sulfide. 8 refers to oxygens as well as the atom in question. So these are ones that you need to know. Calcium you can get from the periodic table. Sulfate is just one of those many ions that you need to know off by heart. It's SO4 2-, and so the whole compound is CaSO4. If you want to know more, especially if you're thinking I really need to brush up on my formulae of ions, then you should check out my free online course, Essential Equation Skills, because that looks at combining ions together and making ionic equations so that you get really confident with them. There's also practice exam style questions and videos on my website, including some material on how to construct ionic formulae. That's at ckchemistry.co.uk, and all my questions include answers, and a lot of them include video answers. And then you can also just follow me on Instagram and Facebook for more A-level chemistry tips and revision materials.